Hello and welcome to Drunk on Tea. Today I'm going to show you how I painted up this Astra Militarum Sentinel model for your games of Warhammer 40,000. So the first thing I've done is I primed the model black, as this will give us a nice even base coat for the rest of our colours to work from. And the first thing I'm doing is I'm going to come in with Caliban green. I'm going to paint all over the body to the Sentinel. So you want to get this onto all of the panels of armour that are all over the model. This is going to take a couple of coats to get a smooth, even coverage, but just work your way around the model in a couple of layers, build up to a solid colour of Caliban green. Make sure you catch all of the armour panels and details all over the model, including here on the legs. You don't have to worry about being too neat at this stage. If you get this over areas that we're going to paint with other colours, it doesn't matter, because we will be coming in over those areas and painting them again later. So just work your way around the model in a couple of layers, build up to a solid colour of Caliban green all over the Sentinel. Make sure you work this into any of the crevices and recesses on the model so we build up to that solid colour all over the armour panels. As you can see, after the first coat, it's still very patchy, so I'm coming back in with a second to build up that solid colour all over the model. If after a second coat you can still see some of the primer showing through, come back in with a third layer and just build up until you get that solid colour all over the miniature. And after a couple of coats of Caliban green, you can see I've built up to a nice solid smooth base layer all over the miniature. And now with some lead belcher, I'm going to come in and paint all of the metallic details on the model. So it's going to be anything that at the end we want to be a metallic colour. I'm going to come in and catch this with a couple of coats of lead belcher. It's going to be details like here on the legs, all of these sort of pistons and springs. I'm going to catch these with a couple of layers of lead belcher. Being nice and careful when I'm around the Caliban green, making sure I don't get this over any of that green. See, there are lots of little details like these on the feet. Make sure you pick these out with a little bit of lead belcher. A lot of the areas underneath the model are going to be metallic, so I'm picking these out with a couple of layers of lead belcher as well. Once again, being nice and careful around areas of Caliban green. Just going to pick out details here like the exhausts, catching all of these with a layer of lead belcher. Anything like the antennas as well, just any of these details that you want to be silver to break up that green colour of the main body of the Sentinel. I'm also going to pick out any of the weapons, so it's things here like this chainsaw and any metallic details on the weapon as well. I'm going to pick these out with some lead belcher. And after a couple of coats of lead belcher, you can see that silver's broken up some of that green and added interest to the model. So now the next step we're going to do, we're going to apply a pin shade to the armour panels on the model. For that, I'm going to come in with some Known oil. I'm going to work this into all of the recesses on these armour panels. So things here like around the door, I'm going to put a thin line of Known oil into that recess to really add some definition Because any details here, like the gap for the handle, and around every panel, every raised detail, just put a thin line of known oil. As well as picking out any of the studs. Now this step is going to take a while. It's really worth taking your time, making sure you pick out every one of these studs and every panel line on the miniature, applying a little bit of known oil to really add some definition to these parts of the model. Just here, like around every panel, just coming in with a thin line of known oil, picking out the recesses around them. Here by the exhaust, sinking some of this into every one of these little holes on the exhaust covers. Found details like the legs, it's really worth spending the time to pick out every single one of these details to really add interest and definition all over these panels. Because without doing this step, the whole model would look really flat. So just take your time, work your way around the model, and apply a pin shade to every recess and every detail that's on those armour panels. And for all the areas we painted with lead belcher, I'm just going to come in and give an all-over wash of known oil. This will sink into the recesses, add some definition, and make those areas look a little bit dark and grimy. And after that shade has dried, you can see it's really added definition all over the miniature, making each one of those panels stand out and added depth all over the model. Now with some wire flesh, I'm going to come in and start highlighting all of these panels. So I'm going to be doing an edge highlight going all the way around every one of the panels on the Sentinel, keeping your line nice and thin, but just picking out every panel and every stud, every raised area on the body to the Sentinel with a thin edge highlight of wire flesh. For some of these sharper areas here, you can use the side of your brush to get a nice smooth line going around the edge of the panels. But for other ones, you will have to use the tip of your brush. Just try and keep a nice straight, smooth line, highlighting every single panel. Once again, much like the pin shade, it is worth spending the time on this step. Make sure you catch every one of these panels, because it really will add some definition and interest all over the model. At any point you come in a bit too thick with one of your lines, you can come back in with some Caliban green and thin the line back down. But just take your time, work your way around the model, and pick out every edge with the thin edge highlight of wire flesh. Also going to make sure I spend the time to catch every single panel and rivet on the legs. Just working my way around, picking out every edge with a small edge highlight of wire flesh. At this point I'm also going to edge highlight the body to the plasma weapon as well, catching this panel with a thin edge highlight of wire flesh. And with that edge highlight of wire flesh applied, you can see it's made a load of those panels really stand out and added interest all over the model. So now there's only one thing left to do to the main body of the Sentinel, and that will be to give a spot highlight. So for the spot highlight, I'm coming in with some Warpstone Glow. And I'm going to pick any of the sharpest points on any of the panels and just apply a small spot of warpstone glow to make it look like the light is catching the sharpest angles. So just work your way around the model, pick some of the sharper points wherever two of your lines of your edge highlights have met, and just apply a little spot of warpstone glow to make it look like the light is catching those areas. You don't have to catch every panel with this, just find the most sharpest points and interesting areas and apply just a little spot of warpstone glow to add some interest. So I'm also doing this to the plasma weapon as well, to keep that tied in with the rest of the model. With that spot highlight applied, there's the main body and bulk of the Sentinel highlighted.
If you're enjoying the video, please press like. If you want more videos, press the subscribe button and ring the notification bell.
And so now with some Corvus black, I'm going to come in and paint any details that I want to be black. So it's going to be things here like the body to all of the weapons. I'm going to catch these with a layer of Corvus black. Obviously be nice and neat around the other colours that we've already painted. Any details here like these springy parts at the bottom of the antennas. Any large areas of silver that need to be broken up, I'm going to apply a little bit of Corvus black to any details on those areas, like here with the chainsaw. And I'm also going to pick out any cables that are on the model as well. I'm just going to catch these with a layer of Corvus black. And with the Corvus black applied, there's some of the black details picked out on the model. So now I'm just going to pick out the last couple of details that are on the Sentinel. So with some Death Guard green, I'm going to come in and pick out the storage box that's here on the side of the model. So for this I'm just going to pick out the main body of the box. I'm going to leave the straps black just to add some interest on the model. I'm going to catch the rest of the storage box with a couple of layers of Death Guard green. It's going to take a couple of layers to build up to a solid colour, but just take your time and pick out the storage box with some Death Guard green. With the storage box picked out, that's broken up that side of the Sentinel and added a little bit of interest. And now with some Mephiston red, I'm going to come in and I'm going to paint a couple of details on the Hunter Killer missile on the side of the Sentinel. So I'm going to paint the tip here and the band going around the middle of the missile. And I'm also going to pick out the light here on the front of the Sentinel. And with those red details painted, there's only one detail left to pick out now, and that'll be with some Celestra Grey. I'm going to pick out any Aquillas that are on the model. So there's one here on the gun. I'm going to pick this out with a couple of layers of Celestra Grey, being nice and careful around all the other colours we've already painted. There's also this one here on the front, and there's a skull on the ammo box as well that I'm also going to pick out with some Celestra Grey. And with those Aquillas picked out, there's all of the details painted on the model. So now we can shade those details. So first of all, with some Athonian camo shade, I'm going to shade the storage box on the side, just catching the Death Guard green. I'm going to avoid the Celestia grey, any lead belcher, and the straps. And with some Nuln oil, I'm going to shade the rest of the details we painted. So that'll be all of the areas we paint with Corvus Black. Going to coat these with a shade of Nuln oil. Obviously being careful around the areas of lead belcher and the green body to the Sentinel. I'm also going to put some Nuln oil over any of the Aquillas just to add some definition to them. And the areas of the missile. After that Nuln oil and the Athonian camo shade has dried, we've added some depth and definition to all the areas of the miniature. So now we can highlight those details. So first of all, with some Mechanica Standard Grey, I'm going to come in and start highlighting all the areas we painted black. So for this I'm going to give a thin edge highlight going all the way around all of these areas we painted black. So on the weapon, catching out all of the edges to the plasma weapon. Trying to keep your lines nice and thin, nice and even as you highlight all of these areas. I'm also going to edge highlight the side of any panels on the Hunter Killer missile, just catching these with a thin line of Mechanica Standard Grey. As well as any straps or the cables, I'm going to catch these with some Mechanica Standard Grey as well. And with the Mechanica Standard Grey applied, we've added some interest to those areas of black. But now I'm going to come in and apply a second highlight to those areas. So now with some Dawnstone, I'm going to apply a thinner line within the one which we just applied. This will really give us the impression of sharp edges on all of these panels. So keep these lines really thin, just within the Mechanica Standard Grey we just applied. Put a thin edge highlight of Dawnstone to really make these edges stand out. So you should be able to see a bit of Mechanica Standard Grey showing through on the side, with the Dawnstone at the sharpest point. And with that thin edge highlight of Dawnstone applied, that is all of the black on the model highlighted. So now with some Ogryn camo, I'm going to highlight that ammo box on the side. For this I'm just applying an edge highlight on all the sides of all the panels to the storage box. Just keep these nice and thin and just pick out all of the raised details that are on this storage box. And with the storage box highlighted, it's time to move on to highlighting the red areas. So for this I'll be using some Wild Rider Red. Just going to come in and apply a thin edge highlight onto the edges of these panels on the missile. So just put a thin edge highlight at the most raised points. I'm also going to put a thin line in the bottom right corner of the light to act like some reflection. And with the red highlighted, just the Aquila's left to highlight now. So for this, with some white scar, I'm just going to come in and pick out the most raised points on all of these Aquilas. So it'll be here around the edges to all the feathers and the wings and any of the raised points of the skulls. I'm just going to pick these out with a small edge highlight of white scar. And for the light, I'm just going to put a small spot in the top left corner that will act like a reflection point. And with all the Aquilas highlighted, the last thing to do for the main body of the Sentinel is to start highlighting the metal. So for this I'm coming in with some Stormhost Silver. And I'm going to apply a thin edge highlight on all of the sharpest points of any of the metallic areas on the model. It'll be all these areas here on the gun, giving them all a small edge highlight of Stormhost Silver, as well as any other areas on the model. And with the metal applied, that is all of the body painted and highlighted. So now it's time to pick out some of the finishing touches to really make the Sentinel stand out. So with some Corvus Black, I'm going to come in now and paint all of the windows on the Sentinel. So I'm going to apply some Corvus Black into all the window panels on the model. So once these are blacked out, you can start adding the appearance of light reflecting off of the windows. So with some Mechanica Standard Grey, which I'm thinning down with quite a lot of water so it becomes like a glaze, I'm going to apply some of this into sort of the bottom right half of each window. I'm going to apply a little bit all the way along the bottom, and sort of the bottom right corner at half of the window I'm going to apply some Mechanica Standard Grey, going from the bottom to the top. Although it looks really messy at this point, that is the start to our reflection effect on the window. So now with some Dawnstone, once again really thinning this down so it's almost a glaze, I'm going to apply this sort of in the lower half of all of those areas of Mechanica Standard Grey. As it's building up to a transition point, like the way light reflects off of a window. And now with some Administratum Grey, once again really thinned down, so it's almost like a glaze. It's sort of just the lower third of each of those areas we painted grey. I'm just applying a little bit of Administratum Grey. Then there's just one more colour to apply to these windows, and that'll be some White Scar, which I'm just going to apply as a small spot right in the very bottom right hand corner and also in the top left hand corner to give the appearance of light catching these spots. And with the white scar applied, that is all of the windows painted up. So the last thing to do is to paint the plasma gun. For the plasma gun, I'm starting off with some wraith bone, which I'm going to paint all over the coils to the weapon. I'm also going to pick out the parts at the front of the weapon as well, to give the impression of plasma coming out of those. So we catch all of this with a couple of layers of wraith bone to build up to a nice solid colour all over those plasma coils. Once built up to a solid base coat of wraith bone, we can now start adding the blue glow effect. So for this I'm coming in with Talosar blue contrast paint. I'm going to apply this all over the areas of wraith bone. Doesn't matter if you get this ever so slightly outside of the areas, because it will look like the light catching these areas and glowing outside of the coils. But the plasma glow will give you a deep dark recess of blue with the lighter raised coils. And now with some Luthern blue, I'm going to come in and I'm going to paint this over all of the raised coils, leaving just a couple of millimeters at the very bottom of each coil of Talosar blue. I want this Luthern blue to cover most of each of the coils. I'm also going to apply a small edge highlight going around the edge of the weapon. Where we highlighted this deck previously, that will still show through and give the impression of the blue looking like it's glowing from the middle and just catching the very edge of those areas. And with that Luthern blue applied, we're starting to build up to that plasma glow. So now with Thousand Suns blue, I'm going to come in and I'm going to apply this on the coils again, but leaving the Luthern blue showing at the bottom. This is probably just sort of the top third of each of the coil, just catching with a little bit of Thousand Suns blue. I'm also doing a very small highlight again of this colour, just catching the very sharpest point around the edge of those coils, so we have that blue glowing effect. And with the Thousand Suns blue applied, next up some Temple Guard blue. And for this I'm just going to catch the very top of all of the coils. So just at the very highest point, catching them with a thin line of Temple Guard blue. And also just the very sharpest points around the edge of those coils, catching with a small edge highlight of Temple Guard blue as well. Then all of those other colours show through around. And with the Temple Guard blue applied, we've really got that blue heat effect on the plasma coil. But now we're just going to come in with some white scar. I'm going to put a thin line running down the side of the plasma coils, just as a straight line catching just a small point of each of the coils, which will give the impression that they're glowing white hot. I'm going to add 3 lines here, one on each side and one straight down the very top. These will be the hottest points of the plasma weapon. And with that plasma weapon painted, that is how to quickly and easily paint a Sentinel for the Astra Militarum. Please let me know in the comments down below, what other vehicles from Warhammer 40,000 would you like to see me paint? If you would like to help out the channel by throwing me a couple of dollars a month to help with the costs of models and paints, etc., there's a join button down below. Thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. and happy painting.